if there's a God, or any God, could that God only create the contents of existence? And is God a content of existence? Is he one of the
So if
contents of
something
existence?
is if something is in the ontology, it can't ground the conditions of its own existence, its own
Okay.
coherence, ontological
So,
coherence.
so what's going to be really helpful for me here, if you can, is to answer with a yes or no. Is God
Okay.
one of the contents of existence?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be, we would just have a different definition of God, is what it comes down to. I think that's the only thing that is different here, is that we just
So
have a
would you
different
say God
definition.
exists in your definition?
Not as we do, not in the sense that we do, no.
Is there any
That seems,
analogy between the two? Is there an
I
analogous
think
property?
so. I think so, because I think that to exist is to affect things. And I think that
Okay.
God affects things, and I think that we affect things. So I think that it is analogous, but I don't think it's equal.
So to
I
affect
mean,
things it's gonna mean like it does so in a certain way. It has certain rules that it
you
follows
know,
of how it affects things.
No,
think he needs causal
I
powers.
I don't think God
Hmm.
has any rules other than the ones God. I'm talking about a God that is all powerful. I don't think that God has any rules. That God is the one who makes those rules.
Hmm.
I don't think God is contained by anything or restricted by anything. Unless you're talking about a
I don't
lesser
know.
God.
Well, but then you're
I
just
mean,
saying it's just incoherent, right? That's
Right, exactly. So
Yes,
Fletcher,
yes.
the context,
I mean,
yeah,
could
this
God
well,
would
choose
be
not to be God? Right?
that
Could
would
God
be the
choose
it's
not to be
actual
not God?
that would be the point. Hold on a sec. So like literally the incoherence that is aligning with these spiritual ideologies like Ein Sof, from Kabbalah. It's this chaos, this absence of what would be any type of formalism whatsoever.
yeah, but that's
Um,
to collapse existence. That's to collapse any sort of meaning,
Well,
right? If
the
something is
difficulty.
correct,
and isn't at the same time, or
So
correct.
what
something
you're
can entail something and not entail it at the same time.
so the difficulty here
Correct.
is, Flenser, you're trying to capture God with human logic. You're trying to say that that can't be the case because of this set of rules that we've come up with based on our observations and our reasoning. And
I
so I
mean,
don't think you can, I don't think that you can, if there is a God and that God is the author of all things, I don't think we can capture him with our thoughts.
we don't know what God is. We know
Or
only what
her,
God is not.
sorry,
So
or her,
in
or
virtue of
it, or
what
they.
does God causally affect things versus not causally affect things?
It's just like what Rodi said. We don't know what God is. We only know what God is not.
Well, even if you say
What's
you
that?
know what he isn't, that's to presuppose that you understand how it works so that you can say that it
Right,
isn't this way. So that's to
right.
make a positive claim about the attributes of God.
You're
No,
correct.
it would
And
be a
that's how
pure.
Aquinas and Augustine were going to frame how they understand God. They only know what God is not, and therefore know what God is.
But then they do
Based,
know what God is. So God is knowable.
No. So
yeah.
that would be no, I don't think. Well, from Aquinas, that may be a different case, but from what you're talking about, which is the apophatic negative theology
Mhm.
in regards to
Yeah.
only identifying the absence of these things, it
Hmm.
would be an abstraction to the extent in which there is no intelligibility within the context of what we would call this epistemological premise of this or that. It would only be it would only be an abstraction into its absolute, to the point in which what you're saying would absolutely hold true, that it would be, well, unintelligible.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that these certain um, I don't know how deep I want to get into it, but I'll just keep a kind of surface level gloss on it. But like logic is going to be kind of the minimal structural framework in order to be distinguishable from nothing at all, right? So how do you distinguish God from nothingness? So if you
Well, the
deny
first
that
thing,
God is bound by logic, is to deny that God can be like coherently distinguished from not God, right? Or from nothingness or from contradiction. So if God is like
well,
ontologically beyond logic, then the statement God exists has no more meaning than the statement God doesn't exist. And so the distinction between the two just evaporates. So it's not that
so,
it's a way of like finding out who God is, it like dissolves him into triviality.
well, my question to you would be, what is your definition of a non-existence?
I think it's a pseudo concept.
Right.
I think
So then,
nothingness is a pseudo concept. I think
right.
non existence means to violate one of these structural invariants.
Okay. And so, what specific structural invariants would be violated?
Well, all of them if God isn't subject to them.
No, I'm just asking about the concept of non-existence.
I'm sorry, can you say it? You got a
So,
little quiet.
not a non-existence. You're saying that you find it to be a pseudo concept,
Right.
and that it would be in violation of what?
Well, it's going to be a violation of identity, right? It either presupposes identity or it doesn't. So if you say it is a thing, then that's going to instantiate identity. And so
Uh huh.
nothingness isn't going to like and so to talk about it as a concept is to violate the very conditions that you said that it requires, which is absolute nothingness, philosophical
Right.
nothingness.
Hmm. Right. So it would lead us to an epistemic paradox of sorts.
Well, yeah, like nothingness can't satisfy identity, right? There's no what it is, right? It
Correct.
violates relationality,
Do,
right?
Uh
There's
huh.
do
no
you
relata,
think
no difference.
do you think, Flenser, because we can't conceive of nothing, then nothing doesn't not exist?
I don't think it's just a conceptual limitation, all right? This is about bridging the noumenal phenomenal divide, right? Because if our minds are, let's say that everything that we see that we interpret as like causality or temporality, things like this, these Kantian categories of mind, these are just going to be like um, structural representational frameworks that our mind,
Okay.
which is an embedded self-reflexive structure in a broader structural network, is going to be applying onto the world, right? Whatever those structures
Okay.
are. And
Do,
so,
do
yeah,
you
go
think
go
that
ahead.
our reasoning, our laws of logic, physics, biology, and chemistry, do you think that they apply to all of existence? Do,
I
do,
think
do you
those,
do you think that if there are other universes that
mhm.
they have the same conditions, the same?
I think they're going to have the same structural invariance. I think how what the structural entailments are of the initial configuration of that universe can be different,
Okay,
especially given, indeterminacy in the entailments.
right. So my thought about that is that there may be universes out there that I can't conceive of, like which just possess attributes which I can't describe, and I cannot use my rules of logic to describe. And so this is why I have difficulty saying that things violate things, because
Yeah.
things outside of our universe may violate the conditions inside of our universe, but that just doesn't mean anything. Like that,
So let's imagine another universe.
Sure.
And it's going to be some way, right? And
Yes,
once you say
but
it's some way, even if I can't conceive of what that way is, it's going to be not some other way, right? And already
we
in doing
don't
that,
we don't
you've
know that. No, we don't
identity.
know that. No, we don't.
Wait,
We don't know that.
is it going to be a certain way or not?
We don't know
Like
whether
it's not our universe.
No, we don't know whether it's the only two options. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, our ideas about how we apply reasoning may not apply to the reality of that existence. Like, we may not.
But
Like,
even
what
to say
does it
another
mean?
universe. Yeah, I'm saying even to say another universe, you've already invoked identity and non-contradiction.
Well,
Or like
are you really invoking identity? Or are you just evoking relationality? If you say there's something
identity
other,
is a kind of relationality.
well, but if I'm saying there's something other than us, and I don't understand the identity of that other thing, like, I mean, I have
Yeah, but you
no
know it's
idea.
not us.
Right, and that's why I say, isn't that relationality as opposed to actually identity?
Well, relationality is going to presuppose relata to be related.
Right. But if I point at it and I know it's other than me, but I have no idea what it is that identity?
Well, you know it is something.
Right. But does it matter if I don't have no concept of what it is? I could say something, but that's maybe completely irrational to say
it's not like
something.
a psychological thing. It's not an epistemic thing. It's like a structural thing.
This is probably why I won't be a structural realist. But I love the idea. I really do love the idea.
I guess I don't understand the objection.
Well, the difficulty is that you're trying to corral the other using our understanding. And what I'm saying is, just because something becomes incoherent doesn't mean it's trivial. If it becomes incoherent, it just may be, it may just be a mystery and still be, still exist.
But if it's a mystery, it's something. And to say it's something is to say at least it is what it is.
Yeah, but if we have no idea what the nature of that is, then
it's
just all you're saying is that it's something other.
Or you're saying it is whatever it is.
Well, here's perhaps I can close the divide. I have a question. What do you term that which is neither something nor nothing?
I call that a confusion of language.
So that is that center, like that the part where you pause because we don't have any words for that, and that it is I'm presenting something that is a non-binary. That's, I think, the essence of what Rod is getting to. That we don't have a word that says something that's not a something nor nothing that is outside of our conception. So we're using words in order to.
Yeah, but even if you're saying it's not something and it's not nothing, you're still invoking identity.
How so?
Like because you're saying it's something and it's not something and it is not nothing. You're referring to it. And so whatever ontological status it has, right? Apparently, you're saying it both. It doesn't exist and it doesn't not exist.
Yeah,
right?
but
Whatever
if
it is that you're saying about it, to talk about it is to presuppose these structural invariants.
Okay, so just a second, because you say it, and so you say it exists. You recognize its existence. But if you are not able to assign properties to it and describe it, then the word it is meaningless. There's no
I
content.
know
There's
that
no
for it
content.
to exist, it can't
It's
violate identity.
it's other. All we know is it's other, it's out there, it's other. But if we don't know any of the properties of it, then
Mhm.
it can be a completely incoherent word as it's
Well,
being
but I do
assigned.
know that whatever it is that thing.
Okay, so then let me just put another dimension in there because I understand what you're doing. You're saying that as long as there's any type of conceptionality in regards to said
If there's any
fill
reality to it.
well, I think that would
Because
be
I do
going a
want to
bit too
draw a
far.
distinction. I don't want to get, because the language can confuse us into thinking I mean epistemically coherent
I
when I
think we're
mean,
talking about you're talking
yeah, the
about the
ontology
ontic,
of it. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
right? So the ontic. So whether or not there's an if it's ontically
Hmm.
actual or not. And that we're, what was trying to be expressed is that it is not ontically, nor is it it doesn't there's category there's no word there's no word, there's no category for what it is that is outside of all category. That's what I'm saying. That's what he's trying to say. What if there's it's imagination that it's that in
Well,
this imagination we're excluding anything that would fall into the context of what we could conceive,
uh,
and if it's ontic then that is a conception. So the answer would be, oh, that wouldn't be the it that we're talking about, and we don't have a word. So even though we're using it, we're talking about a conditionality of an absence.
I mean, does it exist or not?
Both and neither.
I just think that's incoherent. I mean, it's like saying,
Right.
like, do we know, would you say that you know that square circles aren't the kind of thing that can obtain in any universe?
So it does actually. Square circles are absistent.
Or what?
Absistence.
What
Square
is
circles.
absistence?
It is a expression in which there is a condition whereby they do exist, but it is outside of our. There is no corollary for it. The philosopher who went into it and has a whole structure on that. It's quite interesting if you take a look at it. But yes, it
Oh,
does.
this is like is it Mignon?
Yes,
Alexius Mignon? Yeah.
yes, yes.
So I feel
I
like
think
this
absistence
is,
is a pseudo category. I
That's
think that's
fine
just
if
giving a
you did.
name. I think that's just putting a label on incoherence.
I understand, and I would say that the point that you're making in regards to incoherence is the actual point that's being made. That anything that is incoherent doesn't. What does that mean? It just means a limitation to your ability to conceive,
yes.
So I'm
doesn't it?
more talking about what is the grammar of ontology, right? And
We're
so
Right.
that's like saying the sentence, what is the, how do they put it? Green ideas sleep furiously. That sentence names a real thing because it looks grammatical, but it's structurally incoherent. And so what I'm saying is like, don't confuse grammatical possibility with like ontological admissibility.
I'm not. I'm saying to you, as you identify that I was correct in identifying that there is, you're speaking about the ontic, as am I. And I'm
Hmm.
saying that it is the, I don't know if there's an anti ontic, but it would be neither ontically real nor ontically non real. That we would be dealing with a categorical that we don't have name for, because it would then match what Rod is expressing, that which would be outside of our conception.
So this is
So
the
do you
advantage.
think
Just a second. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a second. This is one of the advantages of not being educated on this stuff. Is it's easy for me to dismiss logical, like the laws of logic and assessing things logically. It's easy for me to dismiss that and imagine a space in which none of that applies. For instance, before, if there is a quote unquote before theoretical T0, that would be a completely unknown state to us. So any of the models that theoretical physicists come up with for the cause or the conditions of the singularity could be completely incoherent because we have no descriptors about the state that could have caused our universe. So this is one thing that I think that philosophical people have a difficulty with, is letting go of all that they've learned and imagining that all that they learned doesn't apply to a certain state.
Yeah, but even in making that statement, you're presupposing logic, that you've got some argument, some entailment relation between the premises and the conclusion. And I think that saying, like Mignon says, that like a square circle abscissed, you're just reifying incoherence, right? You've now just multiplied your ontology to give a special kind of being to contradictions. But
I'm just
Actually,
I'm just
in
saying
my metaphysics, incoherence
I'm
isn't
just
another
saying
category
no
of
no no
being.
I'm just saying that there's the possibility of other, and that we have no
Yeah, but
our
when you say other, you're
our
instantiating
coherence.
identity.
Yes, but I know nothing about the nature of the other. So what do I really identify as except an other?
Yeah, but you, you've just instantiated identity. You've
What are the
instantiated
contents? What
orderability.
are the contents of that identity? What are the descriptors of that identity?
Oh, that's a great
There,
question because
I
my
can say
metaphysical
nothing about
framework,
it.
my metaphysical framework doesn't say what exists. It says how does it exist,
Sure,
right?
and
In my view, yeah, go ahead.
and we may be able to, we may not be able to answer either of those questions.
But there's a difference. There's a differentiator between a statement about the absence of knowledge and the assertion of some particular. So you are conflating a statement about the absence of something that is knowable as an instantiation of a something. Because we don't have language that would give reference to a state of absence, it's a failure of language, and you're identifying that failure and saying, yeah, but in that you're now identifying something. When he's looking to say, no, I'm simply acknowledging a lack of the ability to conceive.
Right, and I'm
That
saying
that
I think we can do better than that. I'm not throwing up the white flag at that point. I'm saying if we're going to say that it is something, maybe we don't know what it is, but to say that it is something is to say it is an ontic. And for it to be an ontic, then these preconditions have to be met.
So I would say that no, the preconditions don't and are not met. That is just an assertion with no basis, except to say that this is what would be fitting to make it coherent. I
So
think the point is,
what's the
and I agree
motivation
very
then
much.
to propose or posit a special ontological category called subsistence, instead of just saying that this is some linguistic phrase that's just a misapplication. It's just a pseudo concept.
Yeah, it's not a pseudo concept. It's just something that you prefer to term it as. But
Well,
number
yeah, but
one,
I'm
I
saying
can.
what's the motivation?
Yeah, the motivation is expansion. It means that there is more than the binary limitation, or in this case, really the limitation of the classical laws.
But
And
well,
so
yeah,
this would be
this
some.
isn't limited to classical laws. I mean, that's just like you can formalize these preconditions in classical logic, but there are like specialized closure conditions for each of these invariants that are logic agnostic, that you can formulate them in any logic that you want. So it's
So
not
the
going to
very
be,
fact,
but the very fact that you're talking about it as existing, I'm saying this is the grammar of existence, and it's going to require it
correct.
to be a certain way. And you're saying, no, it could be this other way. Okay, so you provide the grammar of existence, and we'll see if it's coherent.
Oh, so here's the thing. So number one, coherence irrelevant. Number two, the grammar problematic, because the grammar is predicated upon coherence and ontics. So anything said in regards to that which is inconceivable or would only be could be expressed by me stating in grammar, it's an ineffability
Oh, I don't.
that
I'm sorry.
exceeds conception.
I don't mean linguistic grammar.
Okay, what do you mean?
I mean the grammar of ontology.
Sure. So you're saying that by the grammar of ontology is
Mhm.
anything that's stated in regards to anything, right? Anything, any remark pertaining to would be a grammar that is pointing to an ontic. Is that
Well,
not right?
if I may just interject here, what if we think about this other universe again? Would the grammar of ontology, how do we know that it's the same grammar in another universe? How
Yeah,
do we
because I
know
don't.
that the the
It's not an
rules?
optional constraint. It's what's going to keep any configuration, whatever it happens to be, from collapsing into triviality, right? So
No,
when
no, no, not
Placide
not
says
collapsing. Not no,
coherence,
no. It doesn't collapse into triviality. It collapses into incoherence. And if it collapses into incoherence, it may just be a mystery to us and not trivial. So,
well, in
so
incoherence, there's no difference between sense and nonsense.
right, but nonsense wouldn't be. It's not a value statement to say something is nonsensical. So, if I say something is nonsensical, that doesn't mean it couldn't exist because of some contradiction it creates. It just means that it doesn't fit into our coherence. But that doesn't mean it couldn't exist. It
So, I
just
mean,
means it doesn't seem to be coherent to us.
if coherence is irrelevant, then that means that every contradiction is true. And that
Well, it
means that
could be
square
true.
circles subsist and square circles don't exist are both true. And at
Well,
that
they
point, if you
could be
haven't
true.
identified some new kind of being, you've just dissolved the very notion of being. You're not expanding the ontology, you're annihilating ontology.
No,
Yes,
it's not necessarily in a full annihilation. It could be, but on the other hand, it also could be a recognition of a different category
Yeah, but even to
altogether.
talk
That's
about it, to talk of subsistence as being the case is what's going to collapse into trivialism, where all statements are true.
You're talking about at that point it would be a modal collapse, and that
No,
would
it
in
would be
fact
no modal collapse is necessitarianism.
it would be necessary under this case, would it not?
No, it wouldn't be anything. It both would and wouldn't be whatever it is and isn't.
That's the collapse, right? That's the
No, that's the
collapse.
triviality. The modal collapse is to say, when we say modal collapse, at least in modal logic, is to say that there's no possibility, there's only necessity.
So it's not about possibility. We're saying that there would be a necessity, and that you're denying the necessity by saying that you're pointing to one, that there's um, that there's an ontic because there's some acknowledgement, and two, that it would then be, you're saying it's trivial because it's incoherent.
No, I'm saying it's trivial because it fails to properly follow the grammar of existence,
The grammar of existence,
right?
I understand. The grammar that would refer to some, the grammar pertaining to that which is. Yes?
Yep.
Right.
Well,
So
the
grammar,
conditions for something to be,
right, the conditions for something to be,
right?
that would be the only way to escape the the boundaries for that. To escape the ambit would be to say nothing at all, because anything said would then fall into that.
Sorry,
Anything
guys,
would follow from that, and
1 second.
nothingness is equally inadmissible.
I can prove a fractal in 1 second.
You don't need
Light
to prove a factal. I believe in them. Fine.
prolating from the opposition of the sun will never be within our causal needle. It's in our light cone. It's not in our causal needle. There is another universe right beside ours. It's right there as another causal needle that we cannot access because of light speed. Look left, look right. Those happen.
It's so cool. So annoying, so cool. Sorry, carry on, Fletcher.
I'm sorry, Fletcher, what were you saying?
Well, I'm just saying you're trying to identify a new kind of being, but in trying to do that, you've annihilated the notion of being. Right?
Yes,
You're
sir.
saying coherence is irrelevant, but
Yes.
then that means, like I said before, like there's no difference between sense and nonsense. And so
Well, in order
global
in,
contradictions can be true, right? The entire
in
ontology
order
can be a global contradiction.
right. So in order to present a new kind of being, would you not have to break the rules of the present state of being? Like, how are you
That's
going
just to like
to?
beg the question, right? But even once you assert, like once you how can I put this? Like once assertion and denial collapse into the same state, which is what it sounds like you're saying, it's not a new
I
ontological category. You've just erased like the conditions under which category means anything. It's
I
not
didn't
like,
say I didn't say that.
oh,
I
I
just
meant
said,
Placid. Sorry.
oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry.
I just think you erase the conditions under which category means anything. And that's not like metaphysically, and I think that's trivialism. I think coherence is a precondition for intelligibility, right? And I think identity and global non-contradiction aren't like optional house rules. They're like what makes is different from is not, and exists different from doesn't exist. And if you throw coherence
I got to
out,
get ready for bed, guys. Good night. Sorry to interrupt.
you just throw out the meaning of your
Thanks,
own
H.
claim. And so I think at best, you're just making like grammatical noise. And at worst, you're asking us to like adopt some standard under which everything and its negation are true, which just makes
No.
ontology like vacuous.
No, I think that is a mischaracterization. The word everything is certainly not what is being asserted at all. We're talking about a special case, and that special case would be a concept whereby the founder of reality would certainly lead us to this place of incoherence, since there wouldn't be anything to reference. This
Including the
being
founder of
I.
reality is not something to
We're talking
reference.
right. So the founder of reality as a reference unto itself, sure. But as far as how it would then play out or how it would be categorized within our structure, no. That's like me saying, why don't you answer this then? What is the predicate for logic? What is it that grounds logic?
I think logic is grounded in the structural invariance.
Okay, right. And so you're essentially saying a structural invariance then is the assertion of a principle that is without change and consistent in all ways, categorically. And so the question would be, can you name that in regards to logic?
What do you mean name that in regards to logic?
What is this invariance, the structural invariance in regards to logic? What is that?
Well, I just mean that they're pre-ontological structural constraints on anything that is said to exist.
Okay, that's fine. But in regards to logic, what would be those pre-ontological constraints that would provide its invariance?
Are you asking how do I derive them?
I'm
Like you're
asking what they
asking what?
are. You're making reference to it, so I'm asking what that is. Because I know that logic is illogical based upon its own definition, since it doesn't have any reference in regards to an antecedent that would lead to its own inference. It
Oh,
cannot
yeah, I
do
see what you're
that.
saying. You're asking how do you ground axioms, or like what's the justification for the axioms in a particular
If
logic?
you if you, in just logic itself, logic is an extension of reason, right? And reason is what? That's experiential. And so there isn't anything that grounds it, except for what you're saying, which is there is a consistency, which would be that invariance. But again, that's subjective, and well, at best, it's intersubjective. Okay, so my question would be, what would ground that?
Well, so these aren't the types of things that require grounding because they are the
Ah,
grammar of grounding.
got you.
Does that make sense?
So
So, like, the
it
grammar of
does,
English is not a sentence in the English language,
correct.
right?
Exactly.
So it's
That's the point I'm
sentences that
making.
require grounding in the grammar.
Correct. Thus, when we are talking about something like logic, it would be some type of, assertion made, or, a statement that would then be necessarily supported by logic in order for it to be either rational or reasonable, right? But we wouldn't say logic itself then would be rational or reasonable, because it is the axiom in that case for reason. Reason is the axiom. So the point is that if we're talking about
Well, just to be
any
clear, the
ax,
invariants aren't axioms.
okay, but you haven't named the invariance for reason. What would that be?
You want me to like list out the five core invariants? Or
Sure.
do you want me to list out like the closure conditions
I'm
under each
specific
invariance?
to specific to logic. What would that be?
Well,
Or I'm sorry,
so
specific to reason. Specific to reason, because logic is an extension of reason. So I'm curious, and I would love to know what this invariance or this underlying principle in regards to reason would be, that would you know provide its predicate. What would that be?
I'm not really sure I'm following the question.
What makes reason reasonable?
What makes reason reasonable?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? Because reason wouldn't be reasonable, would it?
That's like what makes a triangle triangular.
Right. It would just be the way that it is. It would. We're now just talking about the nature of it,
I
but
mean,
that's not
reason
really the
is
case. I mean, with
reasonable
it,
in virtue of the structural invariance, right? So it's not like a brute stipulation. Or like we can actually
what would be
derive the
this?
invariance.
You're referencing a structural invariance
Hmm.
as it pertains to reason, and my
Hmm.
question is, can you please name that structural invariance? What is the structural invariance? What would to be clear?
Hmm.
Structural invariance means that which serves as the basis for how it is and why it is,
Hmm.
that doesn't change. What would
Yeah.
Yeah.
that be?
So
Well,
there's if I may, Flenser. So there's five core properties that are
mhm.
minimally necessary for existence.
Right.
And the five core properties of structural invariance are identity, relationality, orderability, help me out here, Flenser,
Um, Coherence.
coherence, and inferential conclusion,
Closure.
inferential closure.
Yeah, that's like to
That
say if your structural entailments have something like A and A entails B, then structural closure or inferential closure will guarantee that you have B.
right.
So if you have A and A
Just
entails
to
B, you will have B.
right. So just to review those for Saul, the five are in order for something to exist, they must have identity, orderability,
Hmm.
relationability, coherence, and inferential closure.
Right. Yeah, and
So,
coherence, I
right.
mean by
So,
that, like it doesn't entail a global contradiction. Like I said, you can formalize these also in a pair-consistent logic that'll allow for local contradictions that don't trivialize the system.
okay. But either way, none of those apply to reason. Reason is the predicate for all of those things.
I
So
don't even
that
know what that
again,
sentence means.
reason, so those five that were listed
Hmm.
do not substantiate reason.
Yeah, they ground reason. Yeah.
They don't.
Okay, provide a alternate grounding for reason.
It doesn't.
Okay,
So
so
if you could read one by, I'll
can you
demonstrate it
have
one by one.
reasoning that doesn't presuppose these invariants?
You can't have these invariants without reasoning because they couldn't be
No,
identified and they would have no
that's an epistemic
relationality.
question.
So I think that we need to, like, if you're going to talk in these terms, do we need to understand which theory of truth we're talking about? Like, are we talking about cor- correspondence theory? Like,
I
or
mean,
are we just,
I have a deflationary account of truth that um,
right?
is structural viability.
I,
Okay.
I also too adhere to ontic structural realism. I do. I also
Okay.
recognize that that when we're talking about something like reason itself, that does not there is not a one-to-one. There isn't. It doesn't. It reason would undergird those things, right? Because how do we identify something?
Okay. So here's what I would say about grounding reason. I would say that if I would say that we're talking about the what we observe about our world, and reason would be that which comports with our observations of our world.
Yeah,
So
I
the
think that's an
three,
important point.
right?
Yeah, I would just to add on to that, when you talk about reasoning, that's something that minds do. and minds are a particular kind of structural relation, right? That's going to be that like self-reflexivity, like kind of the E6 and E or sigma 6 and 7.
Sigma 6 and 7, unfamiliar. What is
So
that?
well, I mean, so I'm just kind of, so the only point is that like a mind is going to be an instantiation of a particular structural configuration that has certain characteristics of self-reflexivity, right? To generate an I, so to speak.
Right, absolutely, yeah. I
Right.
totally am down with that. I just did a video on that. I
And so
stated the
all of
very
these
same.
things that we say, like our reasoning or space, time, all of these categories of mind or things that minds do, are going to be like structural frameworks that are placed on so that we can interpret the actual structural unfolding of the universe.
Yeah, I like what Rod said. It was very clear that reason is going to comport with what it is that we observe and experience. And yes, that is totally true. But that doesn't serve as a predicate. That is a relation, right?
Do you
And
think
what you're
reason
describing
is grounded in intelligibility?
No, I don't think that reason has grounding. We're talking about at this point,
So it's
if
brute.
we're talking about, I would say that at best it's a property of of what is mind, which you aptly described as a type of relation. It's what Kant discusses very much so, that reason itself is a condition of the relation of mind, but it doesn't have any grounding outside of itself. How could
Yeah, and
it?
that's where I think we can go further than Kant did.
I would love to go further. How so?
Yeah. Well, I think the insight is that these categories of mind are themselves embedded relational substructures. And they are interpreting something, right? So his objection was we can't bridge the noumenal phenomenal divide, right? We can't get past our own categories of mind. But our minds are organizing and reinterpreting something. And so if we can figure out what the grammar of something must be, then we can cross that bridge. So if we can figure out what it means to be, such that our minds can interpret it and refactor it and present whatever convenient illusion, if you will, not to be pejorative about it, but then our minds are organizing something. And so if we can figure out what that grammar is, then we don't know maybe what are the particulars of it, but we know what the structure of it must be.
Yes, I definitely I concur with all of that. So what you're saying, if let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. Perhaps we won't be able to identify specific properties, but we can certainly.
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying that the properties are part of the structural scaffolding that our mind places on the external world. And they're not things in and of themselves. I don't have a substance metaphysics. It's a structural metaphysics, right?
I agree. Again, I'm very much an ardent, supporter of OSR.
Well, then you should really like my view because it solves all of the problems that OSR has.
Perhaps I'm not really comprehending your view as it pertains to reason. If you're saying number one, if you're saying that, look, reason is the result of the relational context of what is mind. Yes.
And mind
Understood.
is a specific relational substructure embedded in a broader structural network.
And what would that broader structural network be?
Well, it's going to be whatever the structural entailments are of the initial configuration of instantiation.
What would
is
be the
called
initial
B0,
configuration?
right? It's called it B0 for like baseline 0. And it's like the least
Okay, this
point configuration.
This is new.
Yeah.
This
It's
is
part
new.
of
Tell me more.
the spontaneous symmetry breaking post-instantiation closure principle, what we call it. The SSB PICP theorem. But it's
Hold on
basically
a second.
saying it's basically
What?
saying if nothingness isn't an admissible ontic, right? Because it's incoherent, because of the things that we talked about before. And one of the other commitments is that there's nothing brute in the system, right? Because to be brute is to be unexplained, and then at the foundation of your view is something unexplained, then it's not a grounding condition. So B0 is what's called like the least fixed point attractor. It's basically the minimal level of differentiation and instantiation of the invariance that is forced by the impossibility of nothingness. So like to give you like this is one of the issues that it solves for OSR. So like just for people who might not know, like OSR is just like the thesis is like the world is just structure all the way down. Objects are like just derivative or they're nodes in that structure, but there are no real objects, right? What really exists are structures and relations, right? And it's a great appeal because it like matches physics like really, really, really well. Like
Oh yeah,
we think
yeah.
there are these things like electrons, and like we could go down and it's like, well, they're fields or they're excitations in a field. It's like that what it seems to be is a relational structure. But OSR is going to sometimes struggles with whether the nodes in a structure are real. And is there anything that like actually has the relation? Are there relata for these relans, right? And that leads to like a regress, and structures seem to presuppose relata. And so what we're working on doesn't eliminate relata. It says that relations and relata are co-entailing under that second sigma invariant, which is relationality. So multiplicity is going to require at least some distinct relata, but relata are nothing more or above the structured differences themselves. So there's no regress, there's no free-floating relations. And then it also solves the grounding problem of OSR, which is, it says, yeah, structure is fundamental, but it doesn't explain why structure holds together or why incoherent structures aren't real. And so OSR is a form of like brute realism, like structure exists full stop. And our fix is that we explain these admissibility conditions under those sigma invariants and saying that only those sigma compliant structures are going to be viable, that incoherent structures collapse and are never instantiated. So this supplies a principled boundary that OSR lacks. And then OSR also has trouble with modality, right? Like if structure is all that exists, like what makes one structure possible and another structure impossible? Why this structure or another, right? And it leads OSR towards modal realism a lot of the time, or some like brute laws of structure that are non-derived. And so our fix to that is to say, well, modal truths are structural. And what we mean by necessity is going to be invariance across all admissible configurations, right? And possibility means it's a viable configuration. And so necessity becomes the invariants themselves, and possibility means the structural entailments of those initial conditions. So you don't need modal realism, you don't need Platonic realms, you don't need any like brute stipulations or anything like that. And then
All
it's
you
also
need is a differentiation, even in the most minute way,
Yeah,
in order for
the
there to be distinct, in order for there to be a structure,
right.
a difference in terms of
Yeah,
structure. And in
yes.
that
So
difference in terms of structure, then we could say that there would be like you said before, a grouping of that, or what's it called in math? We have our, there's a specific term for it, but essentially that would lead to a rollout.
right. Yeah, and so like the co-primitives in my view is going to be um, difference and instantiation, and they're both irreducible and they're mutually entailing. So you can think of them as like different sides of the same coin. So
And
the
what would
the
I'm curious, please, difference.
yeah.
How?
So to be
Meaning, I
anything at
mean,
all is to be different from what it is not.
no, I
And
understand.
and the
Because any
structural
absolute absolutely defines its antithesis, and anything in between the actual and its antithesis, you have the range of multiplicity. But my question would be, where is the point of variation begin
uh,
for difference? Like, how?
when you
I think
say
I think
how,
it's
what do you mean?
I think it's clear that it's just universal consciousness dissociating.
Stop it.
Why do you have to make fun of me?
So I mean, so difference is just going to be like when we provide a formal account of it, and we provide like the closure conditions of it. It's essentially just to say a configuration must be what it is and not what it isn't. And that's just like required to avoid triviality, right? Without difference,
What
there's
was
no
that? Can you,
individuation, there's no multiplicity, there's no possibility of articulating anything, right? And then
without
instantiation, so difference alone doesn't yield actuality. Like a configuration has to be instantiated with an admissible structure. That's to be different is to also be instantiated. Otherwise, like difference just means like some abstract schema with no concrete realization, right? So
what is
instantiation,
it called? What was the term? What was that term? The term that you used? You, it
which
was from
instantiation.
B0. No, 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 no. It
Oh,
was some larger term. I'm not familiar with it.
you mean the SSB-PICP theorem?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What? SSBPI? What?
SSB is just spontaneous symmetry breaking. That's one of the issues that we believe we've solved for OSR. And then the post-instantiation closure principle, which is just that once you have B0, you can't have any brute jumps that aren't entailed from that initial configuration. There are no unexplained and then a miracle happens jumps, right? This is why from B0, it can't be a super complex mind because there's nothing, because mind is going to be defined in that like emergent. So we talked about it earlier. We said 1 through 5 are the core invariants. And then you have 6 and 7 that are these emergent invariants that can support different types of structure, like these self-relation, these self-reflexive structures like minds. Um, and so that can't be at B0 because there's no explanation for why it's at that level of complexity rather than something simpler, which is why we're pushed down all the way to B0, which we call like the structural base point. So it's the least fixed point of structural entailment, the minimal configuration that must instantiate if we're going to try to satisfy those structural invariants at all, to be at all. So it's not like chosen or caused or created. It's forced actuality of the sigma invariance because nothingness is inadmissible. Some compliant instantiation must obtain. It's like the primitive there is something without specifying what. It's just the bare minimum structurally entailed configuration. It's like the first move in a game that can't begin without like a piece on the board.
Right.
And so like the spontaneous symmetry breaking, so the problem is like not temporally before, but just like conceptually before B0. Um, the conditions are satisfied only abstractly. There's no instantiated difference. There's no relation. There's no order. So like a good analogy is like in physics, where a perfectly symmetric state has to break for structure to manifest, like with the Higgs field. Ode
The
posits,
Hamiltonian,
yeah, Ode posits a structural
Lagrangian.
transition from indeterminacy, which isn't a viable configuration, to instantiation. So among the family of compliant configurations for that B0, so an interesting insight was like, well, perhaps there are like a whole shit ton of B0 admissible configurations, right? That are all equally minimal. Like, so in a game of chess, it's like maybe my first move can be this pawn or this knight or this bishop, right? It can't be checkmate, right? But what accounts for why our universe moved this pawn forward versus this other pawn forward, right? Is that brute? Are we like letting bruteness sneak in?
Your
And
first move can't be a bishop.
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's great. Did I say bishop? Must have said bishop. But yeah, no, that's perfectly true. So what accounts for why our universe's B0 was the way it was versus some other way? And an
Wait,
insight.
hold on. That's it. I'm sorry. That's an interesting. It fits with what you're saying, perhaps. So Rod just made a point that there was, given the structure,
Mhm,
the rule set in this case,
mhm,
this could not be the case, and so the only possibilities would be the knights or the pawns. There are no other pieces
right.
that could be a first move. So, would this type of law, so to speak, or rule set apply given this base 0 or structure?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Would there be a primary law, a set or rule set that would govern these base structures that you're speaking of?
Uh, in the analogy, you mean the no, because these are the rules of the game that we're talking about. And then you're asking, are there rules for the rules of the game? Is that what you're asking?
Which would be the principles.
Yeah. So that's what we are doing. So the analogy isn't perfect because a game is something that exists, right? And rules are also something that exists in a way. We're talking about what are the rules of existence itself.
Right. Which
And
is
so,
what this is what I'm most interested in. It would be these quote potential rules for existence,
right, and that's what we're
i.e.,
trying to
like
figure out.
principles. Who's we? What do you mean?
Me and two other metaphysicians that are working on this.
Interesting. Do you have something written in
Oh
regards to
yeah,
this?
yeah, I can.
Can I?
So we're sending it off for publication at the end of this month. But I can send you if you want an early draft from about 6 months
Can
ago
I
that's
read?
like directionally accurate. I don't think there's anything
Okay.
like wrong in it, but it's just not as
It's not your
deeply
final.
anchored.
Can I read it?
Yeah, DM me your email address and I'll send it to you.
All right.
I will note that like the formatting might break, so
I'll fix it.
or
It's
like
fine.
the formatting is not great there. And this is like before we put any citations or anything like that in there. But the insight was like, what we've got this set of possible B0s that all meet the minimal invariance requirements for instantiation. Like, what accounts for picking one versus another? Is that just a bruteness that we've allowed into our like, system, which was like part of the motivation for even trying this at all? But it was to realize that there's a structural that set anything in there is structurally equivalent under isomorphism. So like B0 isn't unique in its content, but in its structural role. So whichever one is instantiated, it has the identical structural role. They're all isomorphic, so they're all structurally equivalent, which is the only kind of equivalent that really matters at that point. So B0 doesn't say like, or the ontological admissibility theory doesn't say this exact B0 has to be instantiated. It says some compliant B0 must instantiate, and any two B0s are equivalent up to isomorphism.
Any two are equivalent. To isomorphism.
So what's the difference if it's not a structural difference? What's the difference between the V0s?
So you could imagine like this is where it like blows my mind. Okay, so you could imagine like a proof world, right, where it's just like literally just like mathematical entailments, right? You could imagine some Graham-Oppian initial conditions, right? Some like minimal set of all these different. So, but what you come to realize is that the only thing that actually exists is going to be the structure. And so that means that everything that we see, all of the particles and all of the perception of time and asymmetry of time and all these things are just going to be the way our minds put a scaffolding on the structure so that we can continue to process it. And so the only thing that's going to be real is that structure. So we actually do live in like a mathematical proof world. And this is just the kind of cool stuff that it does.
When you say exists, you mean physically exists?
So it's agnostic on the thesis of physicalism. Physicalism is totally compatible with...
No, I mean like it's an object.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like it's out external.
Mm-hmm.
Because like an idea or an ideal would be part of the difference that is separating the VOs.
So like I think the hardest thing for me in doing all of this is like stepping away, trying to divorce myself from like previous ideas on what it means to exist. Like to exist is to be an object, right? But this doesn't privilege objects as some like basic unit of being, because objecthood is already going to presuppose these invariants, right? Like difference and relationality. And so object is going to be some derived structure. It's not going to be like the primitive measure of existence. So like we have this, let me see if I can pull it. Well, so like the core idea is like to exist is to be admissible under the invariance. So it means being a part of a configuration that satisfies the invariance of intelligibility. And so you can actually recast this in purely logical terms, that the world is what we call a proof world. And so if you think of the sigma invariance as like a minimal sequent calculus, like identity, non-contradiction, relationality, orderability, coherence, closure, to be is to be derivable within that system. And so it means to follow as a valid line in the proof. And so B0 is going to be like the least fixed point. And then from that, we've been talking a lot about grounding. We actually have a deflationary account of grounding, which we call inferential closure. right? So that means you've got B0, the least fixed point, and then from B0 through inferential closure, which is that fifth invariant, everything else that exists unfolds as a structural entailment. So the world isn't like a brute heap of objects. It's actually like a derivation space. It's like a proof that unfolds from B0 under the structural invariance. And so this provides like, it's like against brute existence. Instead of saying like reality just is, we say, well, reality instantiates because the sigma invariants entail it. And it does away with any sort of modal inflation. The only configurations that are derivable, only configurations that are derivable count as real. So there's no need for this like all possible worlds semantic. And it's like useful for our reasoning too, right? Like our reasoning is reliable because reality itself is structured like a proof. It's inferentially closed, it's coherence preserving, it's orderable, things like that. And it doesn't mean that like our reasoning can't fuck up, right? In fact, fallibility is entailed by the invariance. There's another section where we talk about that. It's like against infallibility. Right? So like you can actually understand the universe or the world as a proof world where existence isn't brute, but it's derivability under the sigma invariance. And so the B zeros functions as kind of like the minimal forced axiom by the impossibility of nothingness, right? And from there, the world unfolds, right, as an inferentially closed derivation of B0. And so every admissible configuration follows as a structural entailment, and every inadmissible one collapses into incoherence.
Have you worked on translating senses to this framework? Like human senses?
Yeah, somewhat.
So if I like see something, then I can translate it using your framework and see what is the structure that I'm seeing.
Well, so like, yeah. So our minds are going to be these self-referential structural entailments, right? And one of the things that they do via entailment is to create these representational frameworks such that they can continue to operate as a self-reflexive system.
I just want to say that as you guys are talking, I can feel myself evolving into pure energy.
Oh, that's an inflated metaphysics of energy.
So reflexivity is something that you would say is foundational.
It's an emergent invariant. It's not one of the 5 core invariants. It's once you develop enough structural complexity, then these invariants emerge. So it's saying if something is going to be a mind, it has to be this way.
I need to read this. I need to chew on this. Is really, really. Why were you so? Why did you slit my throat on Friday? This is very much
because you're crushing me, dude. Because determinism is totally orthogonal to all that shit you were talking about.
What do you mean? How so?
Well, you can have determinism on dualistic accounts. You can have determinism on idealistic accounts. None of the points that you brought up entailed a decision between determinism and indeterminism.
The points that, the main point, which is interesting because of the discussion tonight, is the definition of the person, of personhood itself. In order for determination to be denied, there has to be a person ontically. that is being denied, and that is something that doesn't is undefined. It's assumed that there's some separate individual apart from these requisites that they're comprised of, and that
Yeah, but you
that
can have
doesn't
a
follow.
theory of identity, of personal identity, that is compatible with determinism. You can have a theory of personal identity that's compatible with indeterminism.
So the question would be, what example of identity would be compatible with determinism? That's easy, actually. That's what we're saying. We're saying that there would be forced from these priors. That there's a distinction between the prior and the individual. But if there is no distinction, then now we're not talking about something that is not making choice, although
well, there is a distinction, right? Because not all parts of the structure of being are self-reflexive.
But that's not a requisite for there to be.
So for us, like the way we've captured it is like the sixth invariant is reflexive representation, and the seventh is going to be structural path dependence, which allows for things like temporality, historical unfolding, right? Like you have some complex structure and has some historical path that it went through to get to that level of complexity. That's going to require E7, the structural path dependence, right? But so we're saying with reflexive,
in your entire framework, nothing would be autonomous or apart from the structure. It would just be a complexity or an expression
that's embedded
structure
within a larger relational frame. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So then we're still talking
but
about
not
what?
Every part of the structural framework is going to exhibit the reflexive representation.
No,
so we're saying that any system that counts as a mind or like a rational agent must be able to represent itself within its own structure.
But itself, but how do you? Okay, so then here's the question: any mind, its ontic would be predicated upon what? The structure. So that structure that predicates it, would that mind not be an extension of the structure?
It's a part, yeah. It's an entailment of the structure, but it isn't the structure. It's like the wall, but it's a really fancy brick in the wall. That's still like cemented to all the other bricks.
But all of the bricks are making up the wall. So we're talking about, what is that? We're talking about mereological nihilist at that point, which I also adhere to. So if we're talking about a mereological nihilism, and we're talking about just simply bricks arranged wall-wise structure, that mereological nihilism and OSR are extraordinarily compatible. In fact, I would say that they're basically, extensions of the other. That mereological nihilism is the extension. We're still talking. We're just now looking at it from a granular place.
I think it's not mereological nihilism, but I agree it can sometimes look like it from the outside. So because we do not say that composites are unreal.
No, not yours. No. I'm saying that the two are distinct, but when we're looking at the brick that's part of the wall, now we're talking about we're moving into that category of
I mean, this is like the limitation of the metaphor, right?
Sure, but I'm saying, if we're talking about a mind, then wouldn't that mind, as you said, be a distinct expression of its what is this? I'm just getting tired of its predecessor of its
Yeah, like minds are going to be structurally entailed by what came before.
correct. So then,
But
that
they're not
structural
identified as what came before. Because what came before
nor-
wasn't a self-representational system.
Okay, but so what we're talking about is, yes, there is differentiation and distinction, but we're not talking about disconnection. We're talking
right.
about extension.
That's
And
right.
since we're talking about extension with, I'm going to just say unique properties of individuation, we're talking about an individuation of this structure. Great. So that is the point that I was making, that when we're taking a person, a mind, and the mind is an amalgam of all of these things, of these multiple structures, right? Then those things that we're saying at one point, the determinist is saying this individual could do no other because of influence or direction from that which it is not. But that's not the case. It's not. If that's the case, then
So that's also orthogonal to determinism, right? Because I think you're maybe when you say that which it is not, and you're saying you can't say that's like an illicit move, because it is that which is that. What I'm saying, what the proponent, you're saying that they're saying what it is distinct from that which it is not, and you're saying no, it is what you're saying what it is not. You're saying it is that. It's that plus whatever it is that you're agreeing it is.
No, what I'm saying is that that would erase distinction, right? It would be to say that the child is the parent. No.
Okay.
But to say that the child is the derivative of the parents, and therefore if we're looking at it from a biological perspective, just purely, then we would say that it would be like saying, oh, this child then is not being recognized as an individual because it is comprised of these other two. That wouldn't follow. Yes, it is individual because of the particulars of its instantiation. That is the point I'm making when we're saying that, okay, these are not influences to a person. Oh, well, why do I choose blueberry pie over cherry pie? Oh, well, it's your physiology. Great. Your physiology, or are you the physiological thing? You are the physiological structure. Therefore,
Yeah, but I'm saying that's
no
what's orthogonal to the thesis of determinism. The thesis of determinism is just saying, given the laws of the universe at some time, that the configuration that follows there is one possible configuration that follows. And that's compatible with either of those views of whether...
No, it's not just saying that there's just one configuration that follows.
Yeah, that's saying, the thesis of determinism.
It's saying more than that. Because it's even if there was just one configuration, the configuration is not the issue. It's about autonomy within that. And that's the issue. So it's saying, well, if the person can only take action A due to its prior, then the person lacks freedom. Is the assertion. They lack freedom. Why? Because they're denied from doing otherwise.
They're denied freedom if freedom is defined as the ability to do otherwise.
Correct. So the point is, it's not that the freedom to do otherwise. That's where it comes down to based on what? To do other than what? That would be like saying, that's why I use that analogy. The rabbit should be doing something other than what rabbits do. That wouldn't make sense. To be a rabbit, it doesn't entail, oh, it's not able to run because it can't run like a jaguar. That doesn't make any sense at all. So the question it comes down to personhood.
Right, fine. Yeah, so look, if determinism holds, That just means that my path is fixed uniquely by initial conditions, including the emergence of a mind, right, as entailed by the E6-7 invariance, right? So but if indeterminism holds, then I can still have a mind, and my path may branch probabilistically. That's still, but not fixed uniquely, and each
It's
branch still has to satisfy those invariants. So in both cases, like what makes a mind is going to be the reflexive representation plus temporal coherence. That's going to be preserved whether determinism is true or indeterminism is true.
Excellent. Then that's the point. That invariance serves as a, I'm going to just use the term fundamental personhood, this baseline personhood, right?
Yeah.
And the individuation of that baseline personhood, the expression of the particulars, that is a person. The conditions and circumstances and all of that follow, meaning the consequence, is also the person. To separate them, given your model, is impossible and completely incoherent. Thus, there wouldn't be.
I think that step is where you lose me. I'm not.
You're saying when it's a structure that is giving, that is producing. I don't have the term, but it's a structure.
Yeah, but is it producing it deterministically or indeterministically? That's not entailed by the structure.
No, it's not entailed by the structure, which means that either way, if it's let's say, what would define it being determined? If determination,
there's one possible outcome.
Let's agree. Okay, let's assume that. So there's only one possible outcome.
Yeah,
so
there's no alternative possibility.
Okay, so now the question is, why would alternative possibility be the requisite for freedom? That's the question.
Well, that's how you
sense.
defined it initially. You defined being free as the possibility for something else.
No, I didn't. I said.
Well, then that's just going to be the thesis of compatibilism, right?
No, I'm saying that, one, there were a few things. One, it's not that it's just, yes, I'm not denying that it wouldn't also serve as a thesis for compatibilism. But when we're talking about freedom, then we're talking about the ability to do otherwise uninhibited. And so if we're saying that if we're talking about structure that is doing what it does, that's why I asked the question, is there some rule to the rule set? Is there some principle to the rule set that would set it as such?
I'm not a determinist, right? So I think it's fairly easy to show that, the thesis of determinism is I think what you did in the debate was you constrained yourself to the thesis of an individual, of libertarian free will. And I think all you have to show is that any indeterminism exists anywhere in the system, and the thesis of determinism falls, right? So if you can point to quantum indeterminacy, right, or
it's easy.
The decay of proton decay or whatever,
no, that's easy.
If that is indeterministic, then you win. You're done.
No, it's easy to defeat. It's just ignored because what's happening. It says once there's
you have to appeal to
there's a
decoherence.
I'm very familiar with it, right? So you could just simply say, look, at the point of decoherence, at the point of collapse and decoherence, there's only there's a deterministic path from there because we can measure that. It's plain and simple.
The Schrodinger function is a deterministic function,
right?
But
correct.
But it doesn't tell us which proton is going to decay at what point. That does seem to be random.
At the quantum, correct.
Yeah.
But at the macro,
But
no.
all you have to do is show the quantum, and then the thesis of determinism falls.
No, because there's a symmetry break between the quantum and the macro. So it doesn't follow. It's to say no, that's not true, because we can map out.
That's what I'm saying. You're constraining yourself to the macro, and you don't have to defeat determinism.
I've gone to the quantum before, and it's a losing argument, simply not because it's not cogent, in my opinion, or relevant, but because it's simply not understood as being relevant. So they just say, look, at the quantum level, that may be the case, but as soon as the lights are turned on, as soon as it collapses, now we have a deterministic flow, and it can be measured, and so therefore, no, all things as it pertains to the people and the macro are determined.
Yeah, but so if indeterminacy is real at the quantum level, then determinism is false, even if randomness averages out at the macro scale, right? But
no, I agree, because if the macro is predicated on the quantum and the quantum is indeterminate, then what we have then is a macro that could have been this, that, or the other, and that's also why I brought in a multi-worlds type of consideration and B block of time, that all of them are.
Yeah, so determinism is totally
actualized.
compatible with a B theory of time, a C theory of time, or an A theory of time. And so is indeterminism.
Okay, right. So I was taking the indeterministic and combining them together when we take a look at.
Yeah, so that's why I was saying theories of
plus
time are orthogonal to the thesis of determinism.
Together, I was using them in conjunction. It wasn't one or the other. That's the thing, given the structure.
But it doesn't motivate the conclusion that determinism is false. By saying we have a B theory of time, it doesn't tell me if determinism is true or false.
How could it not?
Because you can have determinism on a B theory of time.
What is how? Tell me how.
Because you look at your block universe at time t, and then you see if t plus 1, if there was only one possibility that it could have been. If it was entailed, causally if you want to use causal metaphysics, structurally if you want to use structural metaphysics.
But that's what's
there was only one possible outcome.
It's tenseless. So there is
no
plus
by tenseless. So B theory is just a two-place predicate: earlier than, later than.
Right. Which
and all it's saying is that if the earlier than
in between, it's an earlier than but with an infinite in between. Infinite.
Means B theory doesn't take a stance on the continuity or discontinuity of time.
I am. The content. B theory is really suggesting
it doesn't matter. You can take if T0 entails anything that comes after
it. But it doesn't entail that.
Well, okay.
There's no entailment. There's only relation. That's the point I'm making. There's a relation. You could say, look, does 5 come before 6? No. Linearly, we are looking at it and say, well, 5 comes before 6. It doesn't.
Well,
5 is a quantity.
If you take arithmetic to be like a successor operator function, that
right, but it does in a linear construct. It must come before 6 in a linear construct. But in a lateral construct, all numbers are all existent simultaneously, and the only differentiator then would be their quantity. Or actually, in Ontological,
the differentiator is going to be the earlier or later than.
It would be quantity, because there wouldn't be. It could be, yes. You could say it's an earlier or later, Again, that's linear to a degree. But you could also just say it's not that 5 is earlier than 6. What is the true differentiator between 5 and 6 is really the relations that they hold between everything else. But that's not about earlier or later. Because again, that presupposes a linearity.
Well,
but if we're talking about structure,
it's going to propose an orderability. And for time, it's going to be an asymmetric relation to enable the relation of earlier than and later than.
Exactly. So if it's an
it has to be asymmetric.
Relation, yeah, it does. Correct. Right. Which means it doesn't. Then linearity is also orthogonal to that. The structure it doesn't.
But the earlier than, if the earlier than picks out one and only one later than, that's the thesis of determinism. And that's just not required on B theory. It could have been, if it could have been different, that at time 2, t plus 2 was not, that there were multiple possibilities that it could have been. And it's just an indeterministic fact that it was something else that gets instantiated in the block, then that's just what's meant by indeterminacy in B theory. But you can have determinism in B theory too. Like it's there, one tells you how things happen, right? Deterministically or indeterministically, versus like what is time.
I see the point. And yes, it can be argued either way. When we're taking a look at it, that I should have just really pushed on, because that is what I should have included a multi-world as well, which is what I was intending to do. And say, from the perspective of a multi-world, many worlds theory, and including a B theory of time, and looking at structure.
I mean, I think that could have been rhetorically successful against, was it Mark? Is that who it was? Mike?
I think so. Mark, I think.
I don't know the guy, but I think he was also confused about
B theory.
The thesis of determinacy. Determinism.
Why? He was looking at it as, again, a constraint. Just pure constraint. His approach is the same. It's the predominant idea. This individual is the product of priors that they have no power over, which therefore led to the consequence, which are their actions. Therefore, there is no freedom in regards to those actions, ergo, no free will.
Yeah, I think it's so oftentimes the question's going to revolve around how you define freedom. And I think it's very difficult, I mean very difficult, to define freedom as the ability to have done otherwise.
I agree. I don't think it's about the ability to do otherwise. I think it's about simply acting within the scope of one's potential, and that the potential is multivariant.
Yeah, I think you could say something like, my free choices are free if they are entailed by my desires and reasons, and they're uncoerced, right, by some external fact, right? So by locating just the source of the reasons and desires within that individual, that's how I would want to define freedom. And whether it's deterministic or indeterministic, is kind of an empirical fact. But I think we can see that indeterminacy does exist as like a fundamental feature, at least in our science. If you look at the Copenhagen interpretation, quantum mechanics, or if you look at the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, the outcomes of these measurements are going to be genuinely probabilistic. So I mean, so if you have the same initial conditions, if it doesn't entail one unique outcome, then the thesis of determinism is false. If multiple outcomes are possible, if I could rewind the tape 1,000,000 times, and even one of those times I do something different, that thesis is false.
The problem is that there's no way to determine, no pun intended, whether or not the outcome could have been different. Because from our perspective,
well, you certainly think they could have, right? Because
no,
even
could have, but
those indeterminacies average out macroscopically. So, and it just looks like planets and baseballs and neurons, whatever, look deterministic. The underlying picture is still indeterministic.
Totally agreed. But here's the thing: the underlying. So you have potential. You have all these potentials, right? And then you have a particular. The question becomes, well, what, which we don't know, is leading to the particular, which is why I find your framework so very interesting, because I think you are addressing that. But that framework aside, I'm coming from ignorance and saying, well, I don't know what is responsible for the particular outcome. Okay, but there is a particular, yes. So then the question becomes, even though there were many possibilities, there is one particular. Is there anything that you can show, Placide, for why this particular is not the only particular? Is there some absolute or something that would entail that this particular could have been, not could have been, otherwise? That if we did go back, that it would be otherwise. The answer is no.
I think you could appeal to like an abductive case and say that because we observe indeterminacy at the fundamental level, and even if it is true, and it is true that like these differences average out at the macro scale, and even if what you have is effective determinism, that's just a pragmatic regularity. It's not the real metaphysical thesis of determinism.
Okay, what I want to do is I want to absorb your system. I find that quite intriguing. I want to consider, because I'm going to come back to this, because determinism, free will is something of great interest to me. And I'm going to chew on that, definitely, see if I'm going to refine it. But at this point, this is, I'm way over time. I should
I mean, just to like put a pin in it, like, because determinism, the thesis, isn't about how things look at the macro level. It's about whether the laws plus some state fix a single unique future. And if quantum events are genuinely indeterministic, and our best theories say they are, then strict determinism is just false.
Yes, but then yeah, I get that at a quantum level, true. But personhood, influence, etc., as a whole, it's a whole different thing, because these things are not determined at the quantum level. So that leads to other things. So
cool. So
it's
DM me your email address and I'll shoot you off something that's shareable.
Excellent, I appreciate
munch
it.
on it. One thing that people have said is useful
Rod
is to just like upload that paper to like an LLM, and then you can like ask it questions.
Questions to say, I'm assuming it's pretty thick. Okay.
Yeah.
Notebook. I'll check out Notebook.
That's what she said.
So, first of all,
I had to drop down the level.
First of all, I want to. So I want to say hi to Noctis. First of all, there's a beautiful woman in the comments, so I don't really. You guys are going to be second. And the second thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, Placid, would you? Well, first of all, Flenser, am I allowed to send the audio of this live to Placid?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And Placid, you promise if you use any of this audio in any of your content to ask Flenser's permission?
Absolutely,
you have my permission.
Okay.
Just fill my name in.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you, Rod. Thank you.
Yeah.
Don't chop me up so I sound stupid.
I don't think that would be possible.
But if you want to DM me just your email address, Saul, I'll send you this audio because this has just been fantastic. I know that I joked about evolving to becoming pure energy, but that was inspired by a genuine spark of connection that I experienced with these ideas. So super great stuff, guys.
It's been a wild ride. I will say, just like thinking.
I can
about
imagine.
This stuff has been
Yeah,
super exciting.
I guess so. Because you're like, it's not like you're dealing with some trivial niche thing. Like you're talking about the nature of the universe, Flenser. So
Yeah, we're
it's
trying to
pretty
answer like, why is there something rather than nothing?
yeah. It's kind of a
Like
big
the
question.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I should get some sleep. Thanks so much, Frank. Thanks, Saul, and thanks, Flenser. It's always great to have you guys on the panel, and hope you have a great night. This is Rowdy Rod signing off, and remember, keep being yourself as if you have a choice.